Ladies and gentlemen, we're here at the Fulton County Marching Band Exhibition, and we're joined with this gentleman in between us. Thank God that there's some semblance of respect. Okay, Dave McGrath is here, and he's been involved with so many things, involved with drum corps and with things at the high school level. He's a Texan right now, living in the Houston area. And what's remarkable is that he brought up the fact that he was working with the Cavaliers. Okay, I grew up in Park Ridge, Illinois. Okay, and Southeast Park, right across the street from my house, is where I watched the Park Ridge Cavaliers. Rehearse every day. Okay, in there from the time I was about 6 years old.
Yep.
And so they're my guys. And it's a remarkable kind of thing. I know that the Park Ridge VFW couldn't handle that anymore. They moved out to Rosemont.
Right.
Okay, but Rosemont's doing pretty well, I think, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're very supportive of the Corps and the organization as a whole, and it's a great place to call home.
Oh, you bet. You bet. It's a delight to have you here. This is a situation for us with all of these high school bands that are going to be performing with a very diverse style. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've got 4 or 5 bands that are HBCU style marching bands, and we've got others that have been involved with this for a number of years. But the Fulton County schools are doing exceptionally well with all of this. That they're expected to be here at this festival, and it's an exhibition.
Right.
They know that they're not ready, okay, but it's a great time for them to meet some of the nation's great adjudicators to give them some information about their show. And I know that you're going to be doing as a caption just GE, right?
General effect, overall general effect,
Yeah.
sort of a combination of music and visual.
So give us an example or give us kind of an idea of what it is you're going to look for, the kinds of things that you're going to expect.
Well, general effect is such a broad topic, and with the diversity of groups and where they are, you look at the effectiveness, the accessibility, and the engagement of the program, regardless of what their target goal is for the end of the season, whether it's their football crowd, whether it's a local competition, whether it's a Bands of America competition, something on the national level. General effect is general effect. Does the product take the audience member on a journey from the first note, the first step, all the way to the last note and step? And that can be done in so many different ways. I love making commentary on general effect because it's always so fresh from school to school. And from program to program. What about this engages me? When do I disengage and why? And those are the types of things that we'll talk about on the tapes.
That's great. And then knowing where they are in their program now, okay, how do you help them find their way through some of this?
That's a great question. The most sheets in general effect would have 2 subcaptions, which would be repertoire and performance effectiveness, whether it's drum corps, whether it's a local band show or Bands of America show. So, what that means is the program designed in a way that is engaging and takes you on a journey, and also is it being performed in a way? And what's great about this time of the year is most of us, I'm still an active high school band director, most of us have enough out there on the field that we would benefit from a read, from a panel that can help us to evaluate. We know we're not done. We know we have a lot of cleaning and a lot of refining, and like my band's case, a lot of producing to do. We're marching and playing 2 movements, but we have no choreography. We have a lot of sculpting to do yet. So, on these tapes today, we'll be talking about here's what's working, and here's why it's working. Now, I can see that you're going to be adding something here. That's obvious, and as you do, it'll become more effective if you do this type of thing. We can also evaluate the performance. It's early season. A lot of the times the kids are still thinking of it in a functional sense. So they're trying to get from dot to dot with the correct step size. It's all mechanical. They're trying to play the notes and the rhythms and play them in tune and play them in balance, play them in time. But is it communicating? Because sometimes it can be a flawless mechanical performance, but you still disengage because they're not portraying what the real intent of the music, the audio, the visual might be.
Sure.
So we'll address those types of things too.
Well, and we find that in our business too, don't we? With just the playing and how the students will go note to note and perhaps not find a phrase anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and well, I mean, I think that also belies it's repetition for sure because it's early, but it's also making sure there's an atmosphere where bravery can happen, so they jump in every time. So that's what they're practicing rather than something sterile. You know what I mean? I think that's the what we were getting at. Is that it eventually becomes sort of a, in the beginning when you improvise, you're thinking about what notes to play and what notes not to play, and after a while it's a gesture. It becomes something that you just do, and this is that in between.
Well, in this caption, general effect, one of the worst things that you can do is try to perform to not make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And this time of the year, we're so about cleaning things that the kids, we don't even, without even realizing it, we program them to try not to make mistakes instead of programming them to perform.
Right.
So, yep.
Well, and we have other captions that will actually look for mistakes.
Yes.
Exactly.
And
that's why we don't want them to make mistakes. But yet we know that with general effect, you mentioned repertory and performance. That the difference is that with a repertory, that you can look at this and say, okay, we have the possibility to do great things here. Mm-hmm. Okay, performance is whether or not you made it. An old band director years ago said to me that general effect he always thought of is that putting salt in a stew. Okay, you know when it's just enough, mm-hmm. and you also know when it's too much.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. No, and the thing that I think a lot of directors, I've been doing this is my 32nd year as a high school director, so I've made so many mistakes. And as programming shows, and sometimes we pick our favorite piece of music and we think it's moved us all our life and it's going to transfer, and sometimes no, it doesn't, and you wonder why, and so there are definite things about the design that beyond the performance that can limit the effectiveness of the program. And we talk in effect about the triad, the aesthetic, the intellectual, and the emotional aspects of the design and the performance. And to me, emotion always trumps the other two. It's the most powerful. I think that you measure the effectiveness of a performance and the potential of a program by does it make you feel something, and is there a sense of purpose to every phrase?
Yeah. And was it honest?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because we've got an awful lot of things that take place in our music business that sometimes are copies mm-hmm. of somebody else.
Right.
Okay, if it's honest, if it's truthful, if it's really something that's wholehearted, as that we're making this sacrifice, that makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yes. Oh no, absolutely so. And you mentioned one of the things that's really cool about this caption is you could have a piece of music that you've seen a marching band do 100 times, but is it being done in a new way, in a fresh way? Mm-hmm. And that's what's really, I think, inspiring about putting together programs for the kids, because ultimately it's about in this caption, it's about two groups of people. I don't think it should ever be about the judges. I think it should be about the audience, and are you engaging them, and are the kids being challenged in ways beyond the nuts and bolts that allow them to become performers. And it might be a piece of music that they've seen done numerous times before, or it might be something that's never been done on the field. Both can be done in an innovative way that is very unique, that even somebody that's been around the business for a long time says, wow, that was stunningly cool, you know.
Yeah.
And I never would have thought of that piece of music being treated in this way.
You bet.
Yeah, I think it's the arranger in a jazz work or in a classical work, and what they decide to treat it with, or what types of layers or textures they decide to add to it. And this is on the whole, as the whole thing. So I think that would be nice if lots of folks had these types of early season, more macro
Absolutely.
treatments in a scenario where the students get a chance to have a performance and an audience that's appreciative, and the thoughts are like, yeah, this is a work in progress. I mean, that's definitely, having been on the other side of the DCI part of it, that's how the tapes change throughout the summer, you know.
Absolutely.
First tape in June isn't like, hey, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's a much more macro thing, and I think that's helpful for people to be able to hear. And it's a really good thing that you point out about that. It's something that you get emotionally caught in something, and it gets hard to separate from, like, no, you should like this, and it's like, no, it's not coming up to the box, you know what I mean?
And you know,
it's hard to separate from
I
that.
don't care who you are, like, we've all been there. at
Absolutely,
some point where it's
absolutely.
like, why don't you get it? No,
Yeah.
there's really nothing to get, you know, this one. But what's, you know, the other thing that's really cool about this time of the season, like you mentioned, and they can get the feedback, and there's still time. This is a great time in the journey to get this kind of feedback. It's early. This is pretty early. Like, we don't have our first contest with my school for 2 more weeks, and that's still an early season show, you know. So this is very early, but I love that it forces them to get out there and to start to get some evaluation early while there is still time to consider some of these things. And, you know, going back to the whole jazz arranger comment that you made, you know, the other thing about effect that is so, and that's why I mentioned earlier that it was overall effect, is sometimes directors don't realize that the audio and the visual, the soundtrack has to match the movie, and vice versa. You know, and I like to sometimes talk on tapes regarding effect about, you know, if I were wearing soundproof ear phones and just watching your program, would I be inserting a soundtrack that's similar to the one that you're presenting us right now that matches what you're doing visually, and vice versa? If I had blindfolds on and I were listening to your musical presentation, what type of visual textures and staging would I be experiencing? So
and that's become much more of an artistic sense in the last 20 years.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of rating the strength of musical sections with the strength of physical forms.
I think that you know, in marching band, it's you still have a music GE and a visual GE, but in drum corps you no longer do. And even in the marching band sense, you really do view it through a primary lens, but you always have that secondary lens as well. I mean, that's just the way that the activity has evolved.
Well, Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us and to give us this kind of background. I think that the value of what you bring to these kinds of interviews, this is something I suspect that my good friend Dave Knox, who's sitting over there on the other side of the camera, okay, this is an interview. I think he's going to extract some things that you brought out that I think are really fundamental to what high school band directors can be looking at here to really improve the way that they look at this program.
Well, it's part of what we do, is we try to give back, because I've learned all these lessons through the 32 years from lots of mentors and lots of people that gave me feedback on tapes. And so it's always a pleasure. And
we're all standing on shoulders, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
All right.